Talking Politics podcast. I'm Alli, here bringing you the season 1 finale episode. I'm so excited. For this episode, our conversations were recorded separately, so you're going to hear those conversations back to back as opposed to all three of us together. But they're great conversations. I think you're going to enjoy it. Our goal today is to talk about best and worst of the season, the things that we liked the best about our inaugural season of the Strangers Talking Politics podcast. A little bit of housekeeping right out of the gate. If you want to participate, you can go to www.stppod, that's stppod.com, to check out our website and submit a guest request form or an op-ed, or just to find us on all of the various service providers. Season 2 is set to air on July 2nd of 2025, so we hope to see you back. In the meantime, I hope you have a great break, and I hope you enjoy this episode as well as the rest of Season 1. Thanks so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure to bring you our show, and without further ado, here we go. We are doing a season finale for the first season, the inaugural season, if you will, the commencement season of Strangers Talking Politics. I'm super stoked about it. Yeah, I am so excited about it because one of the things I think that we didn't really necessarily mention to our listeners is that we, the three of us, Jesse, Alli, and Bethany, we are strangers, essentially. Yeah. We really don't know each other before all of this, right? I didn't know Jesse at all. I sort of kind of knew you, Bethany, but not really, right?
Yeah.
And so through this whole process, we've been getting to know each other as well and getting to know our guests. And it's been really awesome to hear the caliber of conversations that we're having and the direction that we're looking at, right? Like, I think that we have landed on a really interesting, I don't want to call it a strategy because I think it's more than that, in that we have recognized, I think, as well as so many other people, that, you know, the basic political platitudes just aren't cutting it anymore.
Oh,
have to actually help people. You have to actually interact with people. You have to actually build community. You can't just pretend when it's election time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there was a lot of moments that I really enjoyed because we did interview a lot of different people. But I think one of my favorites was the conversation we had with Derek around like unions and stuff. That was really interesting, especially as someone who, like, I've known about unions, worked since I was like 14. And obviously a lot of jobs try to tell you that unions are bad. And then starting to work for a job that has a union, I'm unrepresented, which I am okay with because of my position. But, you know, half of the company is represented. And so it's interesting to talk to somebody in the union and kind of get a different perspective on it. That was really cool.
I mean, it has to be an interesting dynamic, right?
Yeah.
To see how you interact. Even me being represented and understanding, you know, and not really knowing a lot about the union when I came in, but, you know, I enjoy being represented. I think it's important. When I see how that dynamic plays out in the workplace, it's really interesting.
Yeah, it really is. And there's a lot of things that I didn't realize went into like being in a union. I'm trying to think because there were a lot of different moments throughout the podcast. Obviously, I loved our Down the Rabbit Hole. That was with Nick, I believe. And that one was really fun. The crows and the cookies and the road rage, all of that. That was just like, it was a fun episode. And, you know, it was interesting to see how even just like, you know, talking about what happened with the pigeons, like that in and of itself is political. Like, look what we did to this system that we used and we basically relied on, and then something new and shiny came along and we threw it to the side, and now everybody looks down on it.
Well, we're kind of in the middle of one of those transitions if you really think about it.
Oh yeah.
Life how we used to know it is not the same after technology. I mean, we see it in little things like people talking about nobody writes in cursive anymore because we don't need it.
Right.
It's not necessary. So nobody uses it or teaches it, but that's just one one small example of how when we progress, maybe some of those things we shouldn't just be so quick to toss away.
Exactly. Yeah. I loved that. What was your favorite moment?
I had several favorite moments. Like I really like every episode was like the height for me just because I'm excited to be here. And I'm the kind of person who I love to have meat and potatoes conversations all the time. Super depth. It gets to be overwhelming, I think, for people. Sometimes they're like, Alli, could we not do this today? And I'm like, but it's so good.
You
But
don't want
yeah,
to have a 45-minute conversation about this? What do you mean?
you didn't want to go asking weird questions that no one else would ever think to ask? What?
Yeah, right.
But yeah, yeah. So there were a handful of really great moments that it's hard to pick just one, and I don't think I necessarily have to, but I really appreciated our conversation with Derek. I thought that was good because we were able to get some information out about unions, and we were able to pull Riley into that and get to know Riley. And
Yeah.
I thought that was great. I really like our conversation with Jasmine. I thought was really good.
Yeah. Oh my God. I
Yeah.
loved her episode.
She's got such great energy. Like, and that's the thing is like the caliber of people that we have spoken with is just, I don't want to say it's mind blowing because it sounds like I shouldn't expect that, but it is so exciting because I feel like media starves us of these deep conversations that we deserve. I
Yeah.
think we deserve to have these big conversations with the big ideas that are important. And I don't think we get enough of that.
Yeah, I agree. I do also have to say, as a honorable mention, as the editor, I loved listening to Lee talk from our episode last week. Oh my God, I was like falling asleep. Like it was full
Yes, super
ASMR. I
good.
was like, oh my God. I was like, she needs to shut up. I'm gonna fall asleep.
She's got that ASMR voice. She
I
really does.
know. It's just like so calming and just like the tone of her voice. And she's like, it's also just like the cadence in which she speaks, very like confident, but also like very nurturing and understanding. And so it's just like it lulls you into this sense of like calmness, and you're just like, I will listen to anything you have to say to me right now. Yes, everything. Yeah, like I would follow her into a cult, I swear to God.
I was gonna say, I was like, she could be the next David Koresh.
Dude, like, oh my God, you want to start Scientology? I'm down. Let's, if I can just listen to
Yeah.
you for 12 hours, cool.
Yeah, but we got to do something cooler than Scientology. Like, we've really
Yeah.
got to expand our horizons on the cult. Like, it needs to include, a strong devotion to coffee.
Yeah. God, yeah.
I'm just saying, like, or something. Like, that's the one thing about cults I don't get is they're so boring.
I don't think I'm gullible enough to be tricked into a cult, but I am nosy enough.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That I would
At
just
this
want to
point,
know.
yeah, at this point, I would have fun with it. I'm
Yeah.
just enough of a stinker that I would be like, oh, really?
Like if something catastrophic happened in my life and I didn't have all of the wonderful, amazing people that I have in my life who would for sure just like track me down and drag me out by my hair. But like if I didn't have any of those people, I'd join a cult just to know. Just so I could be like, I was in a cult once.
Yeah, that's great. As someone who, like, I don't know that I would call the Southern Baptist Church a cult per se, but as
Yeah.
somebody who grew up in a very dogmatic and strict fundamental religion, I can tell you that there is an allure to it, right? Because there is a sense of community, there is a sense of shared purpose, there is a sense of security that comes out of that communal atmosphere. And so
Yeah.
I think it's interesting. I was talking to my friend Dana last night. We're talking about strategies for how do we overcome all of this terrible stuff that we're in, right? The awful time that we're in. And one of the things that I had thought about was, we basically have to, I told her that we had talked last episode about building communities that were sustainable. And when I say sustainable, I'm not talking about environmentally necessarily. I'm talking about the kind of communities where people can come and be their best self, where people can come and feel secure and stable and loved and supported so that they can blossom into the best of who they are, and how that has more impact than the fear and the lying and the dominance behavior. And it was really interesting because I was like, well, I mean, for me, that's what church was. That's what church did for me as a child.
Right.
And so I think in a lot of ways, that's what church does now, except for it's been morphed into this weird fear-based political vehicle instead of faith for peaceful living.
Yeah, I think maybe not so much at this point because of everything that Trump has done, but I think that that is probably what drew people to Trump at the beginning, was the same like cult mentality of like community and we all share the same thing and Christian values and, you know, whatever. I mean, now it's gone way beyond that point, and I will forever stand on the ground that if you support him at this point, there's something wrong with you, in my opinion. But yeah, I do think that that was probably, I mean, there's also like the racism and stuff behind it, but I do think that a lot of it was like, oh, we can group together and, I don't know, get what we deserve sort of like mentality, which is very unfortunate. Misery does love company.
And I feel like that the predication of the whole thing is that misery loves company. Dominance behavior thrives on misery, right? It's the only way it can really truly exist with any kind of credibility. And so I think it's interesting, you know, we had a lot of great conversations. I will say also that this podcast has made me nosier than normal. And I had an experience today. I was having breakfast at this place, and the guys at the table next to me were having some kind of a meeting, right? Professional meeting. And I don't normally eavesdrop.
I do.
They started talking about AI. So I'm like literally intently listening to their conversation the whole time, to the point where I started taking notes. So I was sitting there taking notes on their conversation and like, how do I get these people on the show? How do I make this happen? This is such a great conversation. We need to be talking about this. So I literally, when I was done, I wrote all of our information down on the receipt. I was like,
LOL.
I'm so sorry that I am incredibly rude. I've been eavesdropping on you the whole time. But I happen to be part of a podcast team, and I would love to sit down with you guys and have this conversation on air, because they're talking about how to interface AI with education in a meaningful way. And I was like, yeah, big topic, but important, because that's where we're going, right? Kids are already using AI to get around the education. So now we need to redirect that and get into where we're using the AI to enhance the education. So the kids are actually learning instead of just copy paste.
Yeah, I don't know. I go actively out of my way to avoid anything that says AI, because first of all, it's not AI. We all know this. It's not intelligent, but also it's just, I think, what is it called? It's like regenerative AI or something like that, which is basically like the Google AI and like that kind of stuff, where it's just like, it just searches the internet and steals stuff from other people that have like done the research and done the work, and then it just like vomits out all of these things. And it's not intelligent, because if you just feed it a bunch of wrong information, it's just going to spit out a bunch of wrong information.
No, I think that's a great point, right? Because that's part of the issue around AI, and that's part of the things that we have to be talking about. But anyway, so yeah, the podcast has made me incredibly nosy. There's been a handful of people where I'm like, you know what? You might want to be on the podcast, because I think that would be an interesting topic. And they're just looking at me like, who are you? I'm like, well, sorry, I can't help it.
Okay. Yeah.
It could be worse. You know, whatever.
I'm nosy.
Yeah, just saying hello.
Yeah.
Do you want to be my podcast?
Maybe just don't like have a conversation around me and it'll be fine.
Yeah, if it's that much of an imposition, just don't talk.
Yeah, you could just like never talk again in your life.
Like, yeah, while you're at it, you could like, limit your breathing and shit.
Yeah.
But no, so it's, yeah. So like, I have loved this whole season. I've loved the conversations that we've had. We've covered so many topics. Like, I really enjoyed talking with Eric about like property taxes and the surplus, because
that was interesting to learn.
Yeah, because so for me personally, that was like affirmation, right? I know that I'm smart. I know that I'm able to connect the dots here, right? I know that about myself, but it's nice to have reaffirmation from somebody who's been frontline in that stuff for so long, to be like, yeah, no, you got it right. You got it. You're right on the ball with your assessment from the things that you've read. That was interesting and nice.
Yeah, I mean, and he was really like, he had a lot to say, and it was, I mean, I didn't really know anything about property taxes, so it was interesting to learn, and even afterwards, like, do research and stuff. So I think it's been really cool that like, it seems like, yeah, there's been like a through line of community and things like that throughout each episode, but really each episode has been just an entirely different conversation. So it doesn't feel like it's the same conversation happening over and over again, just with different people. Like, it's like, okay, we talked about it, on to the next thing.
And we've met some of the most interesting people that I never would have met otherwise. I never would have known existed.
Yeah, legitimately.
perspectives, right? Which was kind of the whole purpose of the podcast in the first place, was just that everyday people coming together to have these conversations and see what we can come up with together. And you learn the average person is very smart. The average person does know what's going on. The average person has something to contribute.
Yeah, it's always the people that shouldn't be that are the loudest, so it makes it seem like they're the majority, and it very, very much not true.
I'm really looking forward to season 2 also. I'm excited to have a break. I have this intuitive sense that people are feeling the same way we're feeling about these conversations, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think a lot of people feel similarly. Literally.
Literally.
Literally. A lot of people will feel similarly.
Right? I love it. That's awesome. Well, yeah, so it's going to be great. I think I'm looking forward to season 2. Coming up in season 2, we don't have any guests booked yet, but that's where you guys come in. We have a Be Our Guest form on the website. If you'd like to be a guest on Strangers Talking Politics, you can fill out the form and we will see what we can do to get you in the rotation. We kind of pick our topics as we go, depending on what is in the news and what is most relevant at the time. But one of the things I think coming up in season 2 is that we're going to do every other episode. It's going to be just the 3 of us getting to know each other around the topics and the issues. And I know I'm looking forward to it for sure.
Yeah. I think that, I want to let the episodes also speak for themselves. I think that if you haven't listened to them, you should, to get a good idea of kind of who everyone is and kind of how we all mesh together. And yeah, we will see ya.
Yeah, I agree. I think absolutely. Like, I think, yeah, listen to the episodes. You're going to learn a little bit more about who we are as people. I think it is so cool, our dynamic, because I think you can kind of tell that we don't really know each other, but you can also tell that it doesn't really matter, right?
Right.
And I have absolutely enjoyed the season. I look forward to the next. And on that note, we'll see you later. Bye.
Bye.
Jesse, welcome to the season finale of season 1 of Strangers Talking Politics.
Yay, we made it.
We
we actually made a podcast and got a whole season.
I cannot even believe it. Like, I am so just in awe of the work that we've done. And one of the things that I don't think necessarily that we talked enough about was the fact that we are all strangers ourselves, the 3 of us. We don't really know each other very well at all. We just kind of cold called each other, put this thing together with this concept of, can strangers have deep conversations about the issues that are affecting us in a way that's meaningful? And here we are. I think we did a good job so far.
Yeah, I mean, it was a steep learning curve, but had so many good guests come on, people that, I don't think I would have necessarily spoken to. I mean, of course, some were people that we knew, but definitely not all of us. And each of us had the opportunity to bring on people from our networks and outside of our networks to have these chats and gosh, everything from, Great Falls city politics to property taxes to, how language works in a political environment, just all across the board. And, people that are, anywhere from like big on Montana TikTok to have had key roles in running this state for the last 20 years.
Yeah, it's been really interesting to see the different perspectives of everybody. For me, I have been absolutely blown away and just felt so humbled and grateful to share space with people that have so much knowledge and that are just so smart and intuitive about what's going on, and then are willing to have a conversation with people like myself who don't necessarily know that they know. It's been really amazing to be able to do that. And so I'm super grateful. So to anybody who's listening, if you've been on our show, thank you. Thanks for holding time for us. It has been amazing this first season. I cannot even wait to see what's ahead. Like, our first season went so well. I know it's only going to get better from here for sure. And I especially love when my union rep Derek, who was on our second episode, sends me a text message of a Reddit thread where he says, "You guys are getting recognized." And he talks all about how this Reddit thread is talking about our podcast, and we're getting out there and whatnot. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. So I send this off.
Well, a lot of people were chatting about it.
That's great. I just thought it was so awesome because Derek sends me that, and then I send it to you guys, and you guys are like, oh wow, that's really cool. And then I get another discussion about it from my therapist. She's like, have you seen the Reddit thread? Because my therapist friend told me about the Reddit thread that you guys are on, and I was just like, what? But yeah, so I just thought that was so funny. I was like, whoa, okay, I had no idea that was going on in the background.
Oh, it's really cool to see people having these moments to engage with the podcast and grow an audience from, I mean, nothing to having people recognize it, out on the street or out in public situations. And that's pretty wild.
Yeah, it's really crazy. And I can't wait to see it grow in the next season. So tell me, Jesse, what were your favorite parts of the season?
Let's see. It was fun, really fun when we had Jasmine on talking about stuff that had happened in the session while it was happening. Everything from Kelly Cordham's bill that refunds application fees for apartments to people who don't get the apartment. That was a really interesting conversation. And our most recent too, Cleveland and Lee, having the two of them on to talk about language. Yeah, I used to be a journalist. I have a bookstore, and I just find that topic fascinating and see how people use language to try and connect, but also to create division. So I just thought those were some of the most interesting conversations we were able to have. But all of them were great.
Yeah, that's something that I noticed too, is that really all of our conversations were good. They were all meaty, and I'm a sucker for that. I love a deep conversation. I think I kind of bother people with that sometimes. Because I want to get to the core, and let's get to the reality of what's going on and not just dance around the topic because it might be uncomfortable or not.
Mm-hmm. Do you think of any topics you want to hit in season 2?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things actually I want to hit in season 2 that should be a little bit easier now that the Montana legislature is over. We can do, a wrap up, I think, of the legislature would be good because a lot happened. And then a lot happened but didn't happen. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that would be good to see where we're at for the next 2 years. I also would love to see us get to know our legislative candidates better. I don't know how many people in Montana really know who their representation is and what their representation stands for, what their voting records are. Are these the people that are best to be representing us at the legislature level? I think that's important.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to get into some more meaty topics and do a little more comprehensive discussion around things like Christian nationalism, things like the intersectionality between climate change, racism, eugenics, and all of these isms that we see, how those all intersect together and create a difficult landscape for people to maneuver. And then I would also like to really dive into, at one point or another, I'd like to get into racism. I think it's the one nobody wants to talk about, but I think it's the one thing everybody needs to talk about because it's tumultuous. It's difficult. It is a mark on this country that if we don't actually work to understand it and heal it, it will continue to shape the way our country moves forward in a negative way.
Mm-hmm.
So I would like to do that. They're all really hard conversations to have.
Yeah, I mean, those are topics that I think are really at the forefront right now with everything that's happening politically, economically. I mean, it's a huge part of a lot of Montanans' lives that they deal with every single day. And it is a difficult conversation, but one that there are a few that need to be brought up. And, those conversations have to be held publicly and in the open for a lot of different people to be able to bridge those gaps and start coming back together. I would like to, in season 2, maybe reach out to some of our third parties in this state, have some chats with some libertarians, Democratic Socialists, Green Party. Montana's always been a pretty independent state. And so to be able to talk to people who are still aligned with the party, but not one of the main two. And really in Montana, it's the main one. We're a single party state at this point, the Republican Party, but be able to chat with some of them.
I would absolutely. I think that's a great idea. You and I have had some conversations about it, and I think, let's give everybody a seat at the table because isn't that the only way that we figure out how to work together?
Mm-hmm.
And we don't take other people seriously, maybe because they don't have as much of a following or, there's a connotation associated with them or whatever the case may be. So I think it would be a great idea to give everybody a seat at the table and let's see what happens. Can we build coalition? Can we find common ground? Can we foster relationships amongst each other that will be productive for the people?
Well, we see this schism developing within the Republican Party now too. Between, I mean, there's always been frayed nerves with Freedom Caucus and what used to call themselves the Solutions Caucus, and people thought of them as the more moderate wing. But even they are calling themselves conservative Republicans now because there are no moderate Republicans left. It's the conservative right and then the far, far right. It'd be interesting to get some people on who are a little bit more familiar with the internal workings of the Republican Party to see what the heck's happening there too.
I would absolutely love to speak to some Republicans for sure and get their perspectives and, not to be snide or condescending or rude or anything, but to see can they speak outside of the rhetorical points to these issues? Because I'm not seeing it anywhere else. I'm not saying that they can't. I'm just saying I'm not seeing it anywhere else. And I would love to give them the opportunity to step outside of the rhetoric and just have a general honest conversation.
Well, and I think we saw that early on with, we didn't actually get to broadcast this episode because, it was our first attempt and the sound quality wasn't there. But Jeremy Trebus, somebody that we spoke with in a coffee shop in Great Falls when we traveled up there. And I think he was able to get outside of the talking points a little bit. Whether or not we talk to Jeremy again, I don't know if that's who would best be able to represent this internal divide within the Republican Party. But I think we'd have a good chance at bringing people on, getting realistic perspective of what they think is happening within the Republican Party. I think one thing that people think is going on within political circles is that everybody's trying to spin and do this political double talk, when realistically, there's just not that kind of level of sophistication with most people. And we have a citizen legislature. These are, for the most part, your neighbors. There are a few people in there that are wealthy, former lobbyists and business owners that do have a degree of sophistication when it comes to politics. But a lot of them, I mean, I think was it the former or current head of the Senate is a 30-something-year-old man who lives in his mom's basement. This is a person who isn't necessarily traditionally successful out in the private world. But they found an incredible amount of success, playing to the far right and in politics. So I wouldn't necessarily call them a sophisticated player and somebody who's making big changes on the statewide scene. And they're just passionate about the political issues that they're passionate about, and they'll probably talk about it that way.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Hopefully we can get some of them to come on. I know that Republicans in Montana are not known for showing up. They don't necessarily like to get out. Maybe that's just at the national level. I don't know.
I think that's much more at the national and statewide level. Yeah, most of your legislators and local politicians, they are your neighbors. They are the people who are most passionate about politics and who are willing to put themselves out there to run for election. I remember, oh God, I was having a conversation with this guy in Deer Lodge, a pretty conservative dude who was running. He wasn't running. He was talking or considering running for city council. And he's in his early 30s. He's a construction worker and like on a board in town, like an economic development board. And he's just like saying, I don't have the resume. I don't have the experience to run for office. I just don't think I'm qualified to do it. I'm just like, man, you should see the people that are in office. Like these people don't have any more qualifications than you do, other than they're willing to put their name on a ballot. Jesus, some of our legislators, some of the worst legislators in the state are a year, maybe 2 years out of high school, and they were they're the internet trolls of their class. They couldn't get a date, and they hate all the women at their school and their teachers, so they are like, well, I'm going to throw my name on the ballot, and I'm going to show them, and I'm going to waste a bunch of taxpayer money by trying to pass these hateful, laws that discriminate against women. It's a loser incel that frankly couldn't get laid in high school, but God damn it, he's gonna make them pay in the legislature, that's for sure.
Jesus, Jesse. Shots fired, bro. Shots fired today. I'm loving it. That's hilarious and also sad. But yeah, it brings up a great point, right? Is that the whole point of our legislature is not that you have to be politically savvy or have, exponential experience when it comes to participating in your freedom, right? It's that you have a voice and that you're willing to come to the table, you're willing to learn, you're willing to listen, and you're willing to bring your ideas on how to make things better for everybody. So that's interesting. I think we had a really great season. I love how we came together. as strangers ourselves, I love our format. I think we're doing a great job. And one of the things, I know I say this after every episode, but one of the things that I love best about what we're doing here is that we're having the kind of conversations that Montanans deserve. One of the primary reasons that I wanted to start a podcast was because in the last cycle, when I watched all of the debates, and when I was watching the discourse between the candidates, I was so disappointed because I felt like they were talking down to Montanans. They would not step outside of about 4 or 5 different rhetorical points on either side. They didn't show that they had any mastery of the topics that they were talking about. And the way they spoke to Montanans was reductive, in my opinion. And I don't like that. I think we're better than that.
Well, and I think that's part of strategy on the right to focus solely on these emotionally resonating issues that can build up anger and can build up resentment. So people will be motivated to go out and vote on their behalf. On the Democratic side, though, I think there's been this lack of recognition that they're running from a true disadvantage. And until this most recent election, they didn't realize how big of a disadvantage they were at. I mean, when John Tester lost, I think they finally understood what a lot of us have been saying for 6+ years, is that we have, as a Democratic Party, have completely lost the public. And we'd been putting forward candidates who were trying so hard to play it safe. And there is, like I said, a statewide candidate or somebody running for federal office, there is going to be a level of sophistication, and they are going to be paying a lot of attention to what they say. And they're going to be extremely careful. But they're playing this game like they had a shot, and so they're being way too careful when they need to be swinging for the fences. It is a long shot for a Democrat to win statewide or federal in Montana, and the Democrats who run for office, if they want to have a shot, they need to act like that. They need to maybe quit playing it so close to the chest and get out there and speak to issues that actually resonate. And this whole I'm going to be a moderate Republican with the D next to my name, it's not going to work. If people want a Republican, they'll vote for a Republican.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It is so awesome to hear you say that, because all week over the news that I've been watching, it has just stood out to me more and more and more about the Democratic leadership in this country. And I finally just boiled it down and I said, I thought to myself, and I said this to someone else, I said, for the people that are supposed to be leading us, they're sure doing a lot of following. Facing the Republicans. Well, we need our own Joe Rogan. We need to do what they're doing. No, your job is to lead the people out of this mess, not to chase the Republicans into it, number one. Number two, we know what's the damage that is going on here. The people know. The problem is that if you are too afraid to be bold, you are not ever going to go anywhere.
Well, and it's a complete misunderstanding of what people like Joe Rogan do and who they are. We don't need our own Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan isn't an asset necessarily of the Republican Party. Joe Rogan is a very wealthy entertainer who goes where he thinks his audience is. And if he thought his audience was with leftist policies, he would be there tomorrow. I mean, we don't need to go build up somebody. The Republican Party didn't build up Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan saw an opportunity, something that could be monetized, and he went for it. And if somebody like that saw an opportunity on the left, they would do the exact same thing. That's not what the Democratic Party needs to build up. The Democratic Party needs to build up issues that connect to people, that connect to the working class and in a wider segment of the population. Then you'll get those people. You'll get popular podcasters and social media stars. Those people will gravitate toward the Democratic Party if the Democratic Party talks about things that are important to a lot of people. And right now, they've given up on healthcare reform. They've given up on tax reform. I mean, all Democrats stand for right now is not being the Republicans. And that's not enough to get somebody elected.
Well, and quite frankly, that's just not enough, period. We deserve better than, I'm not the other guy. I don't want leadership that says, at least I'm not like that guy. I want leadership that says, you know what? This is what I can do for you. And this is what I'm going to work on. And has vision, gives me something that I can vote for instead of something to vote against. And I think it's also important to hit home on this is that I think the Democrats have forgotten, a lot of their constituents have need, we hit on marginalized communities, and I think that's great. But at the same time, we have to remember that everybody has basic needs.
Well, let's take that back a moment, because when we talk about Democrats talking about marginalized communities, that's what they do. They talk about marginalized communities. They talk about protecting them and like passing, the most basic of human rights laws. But the things that provide the greatest benefit to marginalized communities also provide the greatest benefit to the larger population as a whole. That's our social safety net. That's things like universal health care. If you really want to help the marginalized communities in this country, provide health care for them. Make sure that pro-choice, pro-life, pro-birth, whatever you want to call it, issue, if you really want to make a difference on that, ensure that childcare is affordable and readily available. Abortions will go down if you have good access to contraceptives and if you have good childcare, because people will be able to decide that they can have that child if they're put into that situation. But they're not actually doing much work to improve the day-to-day lives of Americans. Both parties largely focused on corporate benefactors, people who donate to get them reelected.
Yeah, that's absolutely a great point, right? Is that, and I think you said it way better than I am able to say it. So I'm glad that you said it that way, because that's my point. When you want to form policies that are actually effective, that actually accomplish the goals that you talk about, you got to come at it from the basic needs that everybody has.
Mm-hmm.
When you have a baseline of stability instead of a baseline of survival, give your citizenry the ability to be their best self. And in this country, the wealthiest country in the world, in the history of the universe, the wealthiest country, whatever that means universally, right?
Mm-hmm.
We can't afford to make stability. Well, this is not true. We can't afford it. And that's my point. Stability should be the baseline, not survival. Could you imagine the things that we could do if our citizens felt stable? If they didn't have to wonder if they were going to have a house next month if something medically happens. If they didn't have to wonder where their next meal is going to come from, or if their kids are going to go to school hungry. If they didn't have to worry about whether or not they can get the health care they need to be well and to be active. Can you imagine the innovation? Can you imagine how much better we could all be, mental health wise, innovation wise, discourse wise, on every level, if we just did the things that made everybody stable?
Yeah.
Just a few core principles, right? Healthcare, housing, food security, education, right? I'm sure there's a couple more in there, but those are your basics. If the Democratic Party, any party really, but if the Democratic Party got back to the basics and really started working on the fundamentals, and progressively and strongly so.
I think within Democratic circles, there's kind of this fight going on, even against people who want to see change within the party. And it comes to the culture war issues. There's part of the Democratic Party that sees the culture war and wants us to give up on it, wants us to walk away from supporting trans rights, wants us to, stop fighting for reproductive rights. But there's this other part that says when we ask you to focus on non-culture issues, it's because we want a party that understands and realizes that you have to have a real fight on the issues that affect the widest parts of the population. You have to have this fight on healthcare and the economy in order to help marginalized communities. When the wider public talks about a uniparty or a singular party in this country, this comic comes to mind. The Republican Party is starving Palestinians, and the Democratic Party is starving Palestinians with a rainbow sticker on their car. They're not really making real reform. They're not doing that much differently. And when you focus solely on the cultural aspects, you're not improving the lives of not just the wider population, but the lives of the people in those smaller communities.
Yeah, that's a great point, right? Because I often think, I'm not the person that says give up on social justice. I'm in that fight. I believe everybody should have their freedoms, right? But I also understand that when it comes to those issues, a lot of those issues not only will dramatically diminish in severity, but also alleviate themselves when you handle the big issues. For example, when you handle your core issues like healthcare, housing, and food security, you basically eliminate homelessness. Okay, that's a big problem, right? That people get up in arms about. So there's one thing. We've seen studies that show healthcare by itself will dramatically reduce homelessness, not counting housing, not counting food security, those kinds of things, or even education. Then it's harder, and this is just my opinion, it's whip people into fear about issues that don't really affect them if they feel secure in who they are and they feel
Hmm.
secure in their day-to-day life. If they don't feel a sense of dread that they could lose the very fundamentals of what they have tomorrow, then there's no need to paint a bad guy. There's no bad guy necessary to emerge, right?
Yeah, I mean, everybody in this country at this point knows somebody who's been seriously adversely affected by medical debt. I mean, to the at minimum tens of thousands of dollars. I don't think there's a person in this country outside, the multimillionaire class that isn't pretty consistently worried about a bad doctor's visit that's going to come close to bankrupting them and destroying their family's lifestyle. And you do have the Republican Party that at least addresses that, admits it. Their solution is fucking terrible, but they're admitting that there's a problem.
Yeah, it's crazy. Oh God, where do I go with that? They're so big, but one of the things that stands out to me about the Republican solution to the healthcare problem is A, they say that it's not a right, not a human right, which I would contend. Can you exercise your right to life that's written in the Constitution if you don't have health? Are
Mhm.
the two synonymous? That'd be number one. But then secondly, their answer is, well, I'm just going to cut taxes and make it easier for you to afford this. But the reality is that even if I pay no taxes, I don't make enough money to afford a catastrophic event. Even if I took home every dime that I work my butt off for all year, I still would not be able to afford a medium grade catastrophic health event in my household. So it becomes a situation where, okay, you admit that this is a problem, but then you say both tough shit and also good luck at the same time. Here, let me throw some pennies in, which is
Mhm.
in essence what Republicans do, right? They're like, well, I'm just going to throw some pennies your way and make you feel happy because I'm giving you money without actually addressing the real problem, which is those pennies aren't going to cover the bill. They aren't going to keep you out of bankruptcy. They aren't going to save your house. They aren't going to do any of that stuff. They
No,
just,
we live in a state that is now, I believe, the least affordable in the country. I mean, two-income households can't make it in Montana. I have five kids, and two are out of the house. A third is about to graduate from high school next week, and the two that are out of the house have both left the state for work. And my high school senior, she's looking at going to school in Missoula, but I don't know where she's going to work after that. That could pay for her to, ultimately, if she wants to have a family, have a house, do any of those things. God, it's more affordable to live in the Seattle metro than it is to live anywhere in Montana at this point. At least you can find a decent job over there that pays all right.
that is kind of a problem that plagues Montana for a long time, right? And it's one thing that I ask every candidate I come across eventually at some point, usually online. And I wonder, I'm like, okay, so what are you going to do to bring jobs? We need high-paying jobs here that aren't just mining and resource stripping because
Hmm.
we, of various types. A, they're not permanent. They're long-term, temporary at best, and B, they only hire, 100 people here, 100 people there. What industries are we going to build up here to make it so that at least we have the income potential to live in our
Well, yeah, we have a governor and federal delegation right now that thinks the solution is an entirely service-based economy. They want their CEO buddies to relocate here, but they're only relocating the executive team so they can have fun and ski. And so you're creating a state that 5 to 10% of the population is incredibly wealthy, and the rest of the population is there to provide services to them. And they're struggling. It just feels every day more and more like we're heading back to this whole Copper King thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's 100% where we're headed, right? I think everybody can see it. I think it's so overt that this is where we're at. But, for what it's worth, I'm not giving up.
Mhm.
And I was talking to my best friend Dana the other day. She says, Alli, she says, what's the way out of this? How do we get out of this? And I just told her, I said, I only have one answer. And I know for sure that it works because I've seen it, but it's the long game and it's hard. She's like, oh, yeah? Val, what's that? And I said, you have to build actual connection with actual people. You have to actually care about your community. You got to get out and you got to know everybody's name. You got to ask them how their wife and kids are. You got to know your community and care about it.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're more disconnected now than we have ever been, and that's the problem. And the only way that I see Democrats have any shot of winning, whether it's in Montana or nationally, is if they get out into the community and they just start meeting the needs. We don't even need to spend money necessarily on advertising. We just need to meet people's needs, meet them where they're at, get out and shake a hand, get out and meet the needs in your community. That creates word of mouth. That creates a bond. I would rather vote for somebody that I feel like I know and have some trust with than gets on the TV and tries to tell me, oh, well, that guy sucks because of this and I'm amazing because of that. I don't know if you're lying or not to me. I want to shake your hand and look you in the eye so I can assess for myself.
Yeah.
We'll get there. I have hope. I think that we're already doing that. I just saw a video from Riley Neal the other day, and I was like, all right, girl, she's hitting all the markers. She's got it. She's like, yeah, I'm out already in the community.
I forgot we had Riley on at one point, didn't we?
And I was like, all right, come on now, Riley, you got it. That's right. That's what I want to see. I want to see people that are out in the community. Go meet with the people. Go meet with the people that don't want to meet with you. Go talk.
No, Riley's doing a great job getting out and around the state. I'm curious to see, we're still a year and a half away from the election. We are, 9, 10 months away from the filing deadline for those races. I'm really curious to see who else is going to be jumping into those races with Riley for the U.S. Senate and with Russell for that House seat.
It'll be interesting to see. Yeah, we'll see who gets in the ring and what their strategies are. Right now, maybe I'm just partial, but I like what I'm seeing out of Russ and Riley because like we were just talking about, they're getting an early start, and B, they're talking to the people that they want to represent. They're getting to know what the issues are, what the needs are. They're listening to people, and that matters. We talked about it last episode. There is a tremendous value in a handshake, and those Republican people don't do that. They shake each other's hands. They don't shake the hand of the guy on the other, and they rarely descend from their towers to the lowly working class.
No.
So we at least have that, and if we can hammer that, if we can build our communities and meet community needs where they're at, I think that's a great idea. There's a gal who's running for the 9th district in Illinois. What's her name? I think her name's Kat, and she is taking her donations, and instead of running advertisements, instead of running advertisements and asking for like financial donations and whatnot, she's either taking financial donations or she's asking people to bring donations that she can give to her community. She had a food drive for one of her campaign fundraising events. She had a feminine products drive for one of her fundraising events. So I like her strategy. I think it's great. But I also think that we have to remember broader needs, right? Not just the less advantaged people in our communities, but we also need to remember everybody else's needs as well and start really focusing on meeting their needs now. There's nothing saying we can't do it now. We don't have to wait until we get elected to do the work. Election is amplification of the work that we should already be doing. So I'm excited about it. But on that note, I also have to go.
All right. Well, it was good talking to you.
Have a good break.